Hello everyone, this is Mr. Drake. Our first unit in World Civilizations is now starting, and it's going to be on the ancient River Valley civilization, thousands and thousands of years ago. When humans first inhabited the earth, they were primarily a nomadic people. Of course, nomadic means they moved from place to place, following their food source, hunting and gathering their food. But over time, people began to settle down in places once they perfected agriculture. That's an event known as the Neolithic Revolution. That's a transition from the nomadic lifestyle to having a civilization where you actually live in one place and develop political systems and societies in one area. And the first River Valley civilization area we're going to look at in this class is Mesopotamia. By the time this video is over, what you should be able to do is describe the location of Mesopotamia and what its important geographic features were. You should also be able to explain the social class structure that Mesopotamian societies had and describe the cultural achievements of the Mesopotamians, religion, education, things like that. Also, make sure you can define or identify all of those terms that are listed there: the Tigris and Euphrates, ziggurats, polytheistic, and cuneiform. It's always a good practice in this class to take notes during your flipped videos. If you can answer these questions in your notes, you should be in good shape for video quizzes and for tests in this class. This slide at the beginning of each video will lay out the most important things that you should know as you watch a video. So let's go ahead and get started. The name Mesopotamia was coined by the Greeks later on, and it literally translates to between the rivers. The Mesopotamian city-states were located between two rivers in this region, the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. The Tigris River has the blue arrow pointing to it. The Euphrates River has the orange arrow pointing to it. This area in general is known as the Fertile Crescent because it's a region where crops were able to be grown because of the abundance of water in the region. If you know anything about the Middle East and Northern Africa, it's mostly desert, but there are some rivers that will allow for people to grow crops if they live near a source of water. Flooding is what made the land so fertile. Periodically, the rivers would flood the land, they would overflow, and it would deposit silt and other nutrients into the soil, making it really, really good for growing crops. But water did have to be controlled because too much water in an area of growing crops could lead to the crops not being able to grow because the land was essentially underwater and drenched. So the Sumerian and Mesopotamian city-states had to come up with a method to actually control the flow of water. And that was done through the use of dikes and canals. First of all, here is a map of Mesopotamia today with modern borders. So the Tigris and Euphrates River are located in what we would today know primarily as Iraq, on the Persian Gulf in the Middle East. The picture on the right and at the bottom of the page is an example of a dike built by a Sumerian city-state. These are essentially ditches that were dug to divert the flow of water to keep areas from becoming too overrun by water or too flooded. And this was very, very important when it came to actually growing crops and having a source of food. Around 3200 BCE, that stands for Before Common Era, the first cities began to emerge in Mesopotamia. And they were trading civilizations. They used the rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, to ship goods to other city-states. And they could also travel across the desert to more remote areas to trade. And we know that they traded with those areas because we have found artifacts like the one seen here all over Asia. They're not just limited to Mesopotamia. So we know they traveled around and sold their goods to a bunch of different other city-states and civilizations. Most city-states in Mesopotamia had a very strict, rigid social class system or hierarchy in place. Most of them had kings or rulers that inherited their position. The king would pass it down to his son and so on and so on. At the very top of the social class system was the ruling family, some top priests, and big-time government officials that were in charge of making sure the city operated properly. The middle class was what we refer to as artisans, people who had a specific craft or trade. Merchants, people who sold things, people who built things or made things, and also writers. And then at the bottom was the peasants who worked the land, and then at the very, very bottom were the slaves, which often came from the losing side in battle. Women did have some rights in ancient Mesopotamia, and in some city-states could even own property, which you'll find in this course is not very common many places in the world. Sumerians were polytheistic, which means they had multiple gods that they prayed to. Poly means many. Anytime you see theist or theistic, that's referring to God. Monotheistic is a religion with only one God, such as Christianity or Islam. Ziggurats can be found all over ancient Mesopotamia. The picture you see there, they were these huge temples that were built to honor the gods. Sumerians did believe in an afterlife, but they did not believe in a particularly happy afterlife. They believed that the afterlife was bleak and not enjoyable. Sumerians invented the first known form of writing. It's called cuneiform. It's pictures engraved on clay tablets, and you see an example of some cuneiform writing there. It is not an alphabet. It is just a system of writing where each picture symbolized a word, not just a letter. And you can see that most of the words and characters are made out of essentially wedges, okay, that were just sort of engraved onto the tablet. You can't have too elaborate a system of writing or too pretty a system of writing when you're having to etch everything in little by little. Sumerians also had a lot of advances in math and other educational areas such as writing. They are the ones, for example, who divided the hour of the day into 60 minutes, and they also divided a circle into 360 degrees. So they were fairly advanced despite being so early in the chronology of written world history. That will do it for today. Be sure to be ready for a quiz on this information, and as always, ask your teacher if you have any questions. Cheers.